it's been just abject euphoria, like complete euphoria for the whole time. We playing some of the biggest shows we've ever played. We did Leeds Festival in front of plus 50 plus thousand people, and it was just the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Like 6 different mosh pits at one time, and just like loads of people getting annihilated. It was just brilliant. It was absolutely amazing. It's exactly what I used to envision when I was a kid, sort of dreaming about being in a band.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, how much were you missing it last year?
Oh God, I mean, it's terrible, man. Like we were just sat in the house, like eating chicken burgers and playing video games for like a year solid, and it got to the point where like I think I was starting to go a little bit insane. And there's only so much of drinking on your own you can do before people start thinking you've got issues.
Did you think? Did you yourself think that you had any issues along the way?
No, 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 no. I was just drinking a lot, but I mean, yeah. If I was from the south of England, then yes, I'm an alcoholic. But I'm from Newcastle, so I'm a
Just no,
I'm a
just
weekday. I'm just a weekday drinker.
yeah, right. Okay, just a normal northerner.
Yeah.
Listen, with the lyric writing, I know, as you've kind of said previously, it was a struggle for a lot of people. Obviously, lockdown last year and sort of coping with the world as it was. But lyrically, it seemed like you dug really deep. These lyrics are just so powerful on this record. You must be pretty proud when you kind of,
Oh,
are
thank you.
performing these songs now. The lyric writing is really, really great. Are you happy with it?
Oh, thank you. No, safe to say, well, all of us in the band and myself, I'm very, very proud. Personally, I'm proud of the writing because I wrote it all when I was sort of trapped in the house. I had a shielding letter at the beginning of the lockdown, so I wasn't allowed to see anybody for ages because of the health condition that I've got. Affects my immune system. So I spent 3 months, pretty much alone, apart from the Zoom calls, and that kind of just created this period of reflection because that's all I had. I rely so much on like pub crack. Like I rely on like going down the pub and like listening to, because in Newcastle you've got like the most really, really unsubtle drug dealers just kicking around shouting about what they've been up to. And I used to get all of my stories from all of the illicit characters hanging around my hometown, but I haven't had any of that. So it was just, a lot of it was like, what's the word?
Like more introspection?
Introspective. That was it. Introspective. I also did the classic thing of I'd signed a record deal, and I'm from a working class town, so like you're raised to not do therapy or talk about stuff, and I signed a record deal that started getting successful over here, and then it was like, right, you should go to therapy now. So I started doing therapy over the lockdown, and that conjured up a lot of writing material, because you talk about parts of your life where you previously deemed as them being quite insignificant parts of your life, and you didn't realize, until you've kind of unpacked it with a therapist, that like, oh, actually, that's the reason why I react in certain ways to certain situations and why I'm like this. And so it gave us a whole, other string to me bow as far as the writing was concerned. I felt like, and it gave us the confidence to be a bit more personal as well, because in the first record, a lot of it was pointing outwards and a lot of it was writing about people I knew. I found it a lot easier to be honest about strangers or about friends or about people I knew, because I could be honest about them and be completely critical as well. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Whereas it's quite hard to be honest and critical about yourself because, let's face it, we can all be a bit of a twat sometimes.
So when you
Yeah.
listen back to it, when you kind of reflect on this, how far did you get? Do you reckon how honest a documentation do you feel like you've got to?
I mean, from what I've spoke about, I think I've been pretty straight, and I've been pretty honest. But I think there's still so much to delve into, and it's tell you what, it's been a very cathartic experience, man. Like I'm well up for doing it again.
Sam Fender is with us on Triple J. Listen, I've got to talk to you about the opening line of the record. The title track, 17 Going Under, kicks off the record. The opening line is, I remember this sickness was forever. So are you,
Yes.
are you referring to your own illness?
So, yeah, I was at first, but then it kind of also became it meant more than just that as well. By the end, by the time I'd finished that song, I remember The Sickness Was Forever was kind of initially I think when I wrote it I was thinking about my illness, but then as the song progressed I think the line became more about not my sickness but potentially the sickness that was around in my family, and also to do with mental health. I think really it was kind of like because there's a lot of mental health talking points throughout the album, and I think the album is essentially about self-esteem and how your childhood carves your self-esteem and your character when you're older. How those trials and tribulations affect you as a person when you become an adult, you know. So I think yes, initially it was about that, but then it felt like it became about more than just the actual illness that I had.
Yeah. Because I know your mother was diagnosed with, I think I'm pronouncing it right, fibromyalgia. What?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah. Which I'd never heard of, and I read a little bit about. Is that what you've been diagnosed with?
No. And this is where one of the boundaries is. I'm not going to tell you what I've got.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fine. Because you mentioned before that you've got a compromised immune system. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know your upbringing, it sounds like, because you had sort of like troubled times between your mum and your dad. Your mum and dad split, and then you were kind of living with both of them. What's your relationship like now with your parents?
It's amazing, you know. I think you go through your teenage life and there's things that happen when you grow up and when you have a divorce in your family, because your parents at that time are your only point of reference. You put so much pressure on them, and also you grow up with so much angst towards them if they've done certain things that you disagreed with. But the reality is, as I get older, I just see two human beings that were in a very, very very difficult situation, and they're my best friends. I'm really, really tight with me and my dad are tight as hell now, and we didn't always used to be tight as hell. There was a long sort of stretch of time where we didn't really see each other that much. He lived in a different country, and I kind of only saw him a handful of times over the course of sort of 3 years, and it was always in the pub. We never ever saw each other in person. I'd only ever see him down the pub surrounded by his mates. So it was quite tough for it to ever. I couldn't really talk to him about kind of how I felt about the whole situation and how I felt about it when I was younger. So, so it became like we struggled to communicate without, it becoming a standoff, because that's what blokes are like. It became that thing of like, we just end up, it's hard to chat to them without we wanting to like punch each other's fucking heads in.
Right. How do they feel about where you've ended up? I mean, they must be incredibly proud, but also just kind of reflecting back, when did they kind of know that you might have had talent music-wise?
Well, my dad's a club musician back in the 70s. He used to play the social clubs and he used to smash it. He used to be a great singer. He still is a great singer. I got that from him, really. It was kind of what I grew up around, and so I think my dad's proud as punch.
Another great moment from his new album, 17 Going Under. So that track is called The Leveler by Sam Fender. So let's speak to him right now. What's that one about?
It was basically a song about depression, essentially. The depression and over the lockdown. But it's kind of like a war cry against depression. Do you know what I mean? It's me kind of trying to rail against it, and rail against falling under, because so many of the close friends have fallen victim to their mental health. And at the time I was isolated and felt very alone and very sort of self-loathing, and it was about COVID as well. I didn't really want to write about COVID because nobody wanted to ever hear about it, but I suppose that song is actually the only one that kind of bears any reference to the whole pandemic. And it was kind of how I felt like there was, because of the isolation, I'd got to a stage where I felt pretty kooky, pretty insane.
The therapy that you were doing though during lockdown, that must have helped.
Yeah, it definitely helped, but it's not. they don't put a disclaimer on therapy. It's not like it's not easy. It's kind of like a Spanish Inquisition in your psyche, and you're sat there trying to figure out why you're being such a tit all the time. And it's a lot of it takes honesty to kind of to get the most out of it, I think.
Just quickly before we get to a final song off this record, Sam, the influences, I think you've kind of left them behind on the first record, which is really great to hear as well. I feel like you're, you know, you've kind of forging your own path musically more on this record. Do you hear it that way too?
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely parts of it which still bear the sort of, you know, the Springsteen comparisons, but I think as a whole, the record, it has continuity sonically through the in a certain way, but I think it also kind of shows a complete different light to the first one. Like the first one was very much what it was, you know, it was songs that I wrote from being 19, and this one kind of was written within 2 years, and all of the songs I feel like have a similar theme. I feel like there's a lot more continuity. Yeah, so I'm chuffed with it, man. Like I'm really, me and the boys are proper proud with what we've done, and it was very much a family project.
Listen, let's go out with one final song, Sam. It's been good to talk to you. Well done on this record. What about Get You Down, which is obviously, you know, it's one of the key moments. It's the song that we're playing at the moment on Triple J. Once again, what was the sort of direct inspiration for this song, do you think?
Yeah, Get You Down was, you know, kind of about how issues with self-esteem sort of affect your relationship, and how it affected one of my relationships that I had. And it's sort of that moment where you're kind of becoming aware that, you know, you're letting insecurity get the better of you, and it's that kind of that moment where you're aware of it, but you don't know how to fix it yet. It was that kind of transitional period, and that's literally all it's about.
Yeah.
It's a sad song, but it's uplifting in a, like, musically, I think.
Yeah, well, it does have that sort of lift to it as well. Do you think you're in a better place, obviously, now? Do you think you kind of got through all those insecurity things and are much wiser for it now?
I think I wouldn't ever say that I'm sorted, but I'm definitely better than what I was. You know, I think, you know, we all have insecurities. It doesn't matter how much work you do, but I'm definitely further on than I was at the beginning of my 20s. Like, you know what I mean? I don't rip me cupboard doors off anymore. So that's a good start.